The very first mission in NASA's Artemis program finally took the Orion spacecraft all around the moon, marking a significant step forward in the aggressive plan to bring humans to the lunar surface by 2025. It's also the start of the White House's grand plans for the permanent observation post on the moon. The National Science and Technology Council of the White House released the new National Cislunar Science and Technology Strategy last week, a broad document that helps explain the Biden administration's goals for cislunar space, which is the area between the Earth and the moon's gravitational pull. The approach identifies 4 primary goals that appear to make a lot of sense in general. These include investing in research and development, collaborating with other countries, constructing space communications networks, and increasing humanity's overall situational awareness close to and on the moon. This plan does, however, allude to a number of unanswered legal, political, and environmental issues about how life on the lunar surface would function. Test missions such as Artemis 1 now, and the next manned mission, and then the first landing, are fairly well laid out. Scott Pace, director of George Washington University Space Policy Institute, told Recode, "The question is, what happens next?" Part of the answer is advancing science. For example, the United States is interested in learning how to use the far side of the moon, a protected zone of the moon that does not receive radio frequencies from Earth, to make different forms of astronomical observations. Improving resources and technology on the lunar surface may make it easier to launch Mars missions in the future. However, the government is also interested in the moon for reasons other than broadening humanity's understanding of the universe. The White House's new strategy highlights the economic development activities and economic growth available in cislunar space and on the moon, as well as the government's political objectives such as legalizing U.S. leadership. It's very evident that this is going to revolve around the economic prospects from the moon, not just the research and science, explained Namrata Goswami, an independent space policy analyst. Until now, the United States has been very hesitant to openly engage in the manufacturing use of lunar resources. Pace believes that if the US achieves its goal, the moon will eventually look very different. Many more satellites would be placed in lunar orbit, including a lunar GPS network and a human space station that could accommodate human astronauts and serve as a pit stop before landing on the moon's surface. While there are no discussions about establishing a lunar city, there are plans for a permanent observation post on the moon's south pole, where crews could spend 6-month rotations. China and Russia have also announced their own plans for a lunar outpost as well. If NASA could have its way, the lunar surface could ultimately include nuclear power plants, resource extraction operations, and even something that would provide internet on the moon. Given these plans, the US government estimates that human activity in cislunar space over the next decade could surpass everything that has occurred there since 1957. However, the White House's plans face several obstacles. According to Michelle Hanlon, co-director at the Air and Space Law Center at the University of Mississippi Law School, political unrest alone could be a major source of tension. For one thing, there is still no globally agreed-upon vision for the moon's future. Just over 20 nations have signed the US-led Artemis Records, a set of guidelines for exploring and utilizing the lunar surface, among other things. Unsurprisingly, the former head of Russia's space agency stated that the country would not endorse nor support the Artemis program in its current form, and Congress has prohibited NASA from working with China since 2011. While the White House continues to promote international cooperation, and the moon itself is quite large, it's just under 15 million square miles. Multiple countries may end up competing for the same resources, such as a specific landing site or a large collection of materials. These tensions may even have an impact on the government's primary goal of achieving a common understanding of what's going on in the cislunar space. The White House has stated that it wishes to increase access to information on space weather and satellite tracking in order to assist with the emerging threat of satellite traffic control, as well as to create a library of all objects on the moon. However, it is unclear how this will be accomplished. "I believe the United States is a long way from achieving this," said Mariaba Jia, co-founder and chief scientist of Privateer Space, in an email. When it comes to space object libraries in the United States right now, this is pretty much created, developed, and maintained exclusively by the US Military Department of Defense, which for obvious reasons cannot be a completely transparent organization. At the same time, humanity has started transporting to the moon a more urgent problem: junk. The lunar surface is already littered with items left behind by astronauts, such as golf balls and close to 100 bags of poop. Humans have also discovered ways to devastate the moon without actually setting foot on it. NASA purposefully smashed a robotic spacecraft into the lunar surface in 2009 in order to study possible sources of water on the moon. The space junk, presumed to be from a Chinese rocket mission in 2014, crashed into the lunar surface just past March. Environmentalists in space are concerned that some of the environmental destruction caused by humans on Earth will also become an issue on the moon in its lunar orbit. Ideally, the developing space economy would prioritize space pollution prevention and the avoidance of single-use machinery such as satellites, rovers, and rockets. We need to make those things reusable and recyclable, said Jia, a UT Austin aerospace engineering professor. For the ones that can't be, how do we discard of them properly so they don't have a negative environmental impact, as opposed to just abandoning these? Of course, the White House's newly released strategy is only a first draft of what the government's proposals for the moon might eventually look like, and there's no assurance that the US vision will be realized. However, it is becoming increasingly clear that the Artemis-era space age will be fraught with difficulties. As humans travel deeper into space and onto the moon, they risk introducing the same issues that we haven't resolved here on Earth, such as conflict between countries, environmental damage, and even the struggle of conserving our history. It would be tragic if Neil Armstrong's boot prints were erased, either accidentally or intentionally, as a result of all these activities on the moon, Hanlon said. It's going to get very crowded very quickly.